Hola, ¿cómo están, my compañeros? Let me tell you about the 12th Amendment. The 12th Amendment is the amendment that makes it to where it lays out the requirements to be a president as well as the procedures for electing him. And then the more important thing, it lays out for the procedures for the vice president and electing him, giving the Electoral College one vote for the president and then giving them a second round of voting for the vice president. The reason why they had to do this is because immediately following George Washington's two initial terms, 1796 was the year of the election. It was John Adams versus Thomas Jefferson, and they were going against each other, but it was prior to the 12th Amendment. So they're number one and number two most popular guys in the country, and they're at odds with each other. They do not like each other. And what ended up happening is they got stuck as John Adams became the president and Thomas Jefferson was the vice president, and there are two opposing parties. And so what happened, that was the 1796 to 1800 presidency. And then in the 1800s, they were able to the Jeffersonian Democrats or Republicans were soundly able to defeat John Adams. But what ended up happening is their faction, they voted 73 electoral college votes for Jefferson, but then also they accidentally voted the same number of electoral college votes for his vice president. The ticket was supposed to be Jefferson and Burr, but what ended up happening is that Burr presidency became a possibility. And there are some individuals in the lame duck Congress who are eager to thwart Jefferson's presidency, considering he had just dealt with that, the being the vice president under Adams, and now he had won the presidency, and now he's dealing with having to be vice president under the person he was supposed to be vice president under. But what ended up happening is that Alexander Hamilton smoothed it all out. Things transpired, and in 1800, Thomas Jefferson was president, and Burr was vice president. So they've had these problems from 1700 or 1790, or since Washington. I guess that's one election, two election, three election, four elections. That's four elections. They've had four elections. It's 1804. And they're like, oh my goodness, we need to do something. And so I think it says here in the 7th Congress, Constitutional Crisis, the election of 1800s, implementing the 12th Amendment, election since 1804. As noted previously, Congress has conducted, that's what it's called. It's called a contingent election. The 12th Amendment lays out the necessary steps for a contingent election as it relates to the president and, more importantly, the vice president. The contingent election allows for the idea of a two-party system. A contingent election makes it to where the executive branch admits that it will be a one-party entity at any given time. There will never be a time where the executive branch is occupied by two separate parties, like the legislative branch is occupied by two separate parties. And the Constitution laid out the executive branch to be housed by two separate parties, but that's just unrealistic, I guess. And so the 12th Amendment really codifies the idea of a two-party system. And the two times the 12th Amendment has been implemented have been times where three or more candidates split the electoral vote so that no one receives a majority, or faithless electors in sufficient numbers either cast blank ballots or vote for candidates other than those to whom they are pledged, so as to deny the majority any ticket or candidate, or the Electoral College ties at 269 votes for each candidate. Those are the times the 12th Amendment will be implemented. The idea that the people elect the electors. The people cast their popular vote in their state, and the electors are bound to that, because people cast a popular vote in the state, and then the electors don't cast a popular vote. They cast electoral college vote because of the way that they're divided up. And so you can have faithless electors, and those are individuals who are sent up to the electoral college. It's between November 4th and December 7th. That's the month that they're dealing with this. These faithless electors can go and they can cause problems because they're the ones that actually submit the vote for the presidency. There are some states that actually have laws and criminal penalties for being a faithless elector. But other states don't have laws for faithless electors. So that's an interesting thing to consider, the fact that the people have always been represented by a legislation. The idea that the popular vote has been the end all be all of the United States electoral system is not accurate. It doesn't give it its due. It doesn't allow for an individual to see how dynamic the system is. It's such a wonderful thing to realize how beautiful the Electoral College is, because it helps you realize that this is a system that has been tried, true, and tested, and that has history behind it. This is a system that you can know where you're going. So for this next month, everybody needs to anticipate on November 4th to December 14th of 2020. Let's see what we got. November 4th to December 14th of 2020, counting popular votes and filing certificates of ascertainment. So following Election Day, the states are to count and certify popular vote results according to their respective statutory and procedural requirements. So in this instance, popular vote is the mandate for the state. It's just not the mandate for the country. Do not allow for them to make you feel as if the candidate that is desired is not the candidate that is selected. When the states have completed their vote counts and ascertained the official result, the U.S. Code requires the state government to prepare as soon as practicable documents known as certificates of ascertainment of the vote. The certificates must list the names of the electors chosen by the voters and the number of voters received in the popular election results. Also, the names of all losing candidates for the electors and the number of votes they received. Certificates of ascertainment, which are often signed by the state governor, must carry the seal of the state. One copy is forwarded to the archivist, while duplicates of the certificate of ascertainment must be provided to the electors. So you're going to see a lot of stuff on the news, but from November 4th until December 14th, that is the process that will be taking place. They'll be certifying the vote. They'll be leading up to the state of safe harbor deadline. The safe harbor deadline is defined as U.S. Code 3, subsection 5 provides that if election results are contested in any state, and if the state prior to election day has enacted procedures to settle controversies or contest over electors and electoral votes, and if these procedures have been applied and the results have been determined 6 days before the electors' meetings, then these results are considered to be conclusive and will apply in the counting of the electoral votes. This date is known as the safe harbor deadline. That is saying that if each state has remedies to solve their own internal issues, that is the deadline. The safe harbor deadline is December 8th. There's legislation being put in by an individual, Mr. Marco Rubio. He's trying to put in legislation that would effectively push the safe harbor deadline back to January 2nd, January 1st. He's a Republican, and he's trying to push the safe harbor back to January 1st. I think there's also a Democrat who also has a House resolution in, David E. Price, and he's trying to change it back to the same day, but using different wording. So this safe harbor deadline is going to be the next thing that we're hearing about. That's going to be, if we hit the safe harbor deadline prior to any extension being put in, then we'll know we'll have an answer sooner than later. But if you hear any sort of extension to the safe harbor deadline could put us all the way past to January 2nd. If that was the case, then January 2nd, January 2nd, introduced by Representative David E. Price, would change the safe harbor date and also reschedule the Electoral College meetings to the first day after January 1st. It would also expedite delivery of certificates of electoral vote and reschedule the joint sessions of Congress to count the electoral votes to the second day after the revised deadline. So the second day after the revised deadline. The reason why they're trying to push the safe harbor deadline back is because if the safe harbor deadline is not met, then they immediately have to go into the 12th Amendment. They immediately have to begin to execute the 12th Amendment. If the safe harbor deadline is met, failure to deliver certificates by December 23rd. The date known as the safe harbor deadline falls on December 8th in 2020. The governor of any state where there was a contest and the contest was decided according to established state procedures is required to send a certificate. Sends a certificate describing the form and manner by which the determination was made to the archivist as soon as practicable. Roger that. So December 14th rolls around. Electors vote in their states. Monday after the second Wednesday in December of the presidential election years is set as the date on which the electors meet and vote. I'll say that again. Monday after the second Wednesday in December of the presidential election year. So December 14th, the first thing you're going to be hearing about is the safe harbor deadline. That's the deadline for all state procedures to be enacted. They're trying to push the safe harbor deadline back from December 8th to January because these situations in these states, this legislation and the court process inside the state, it might take a little bit longer. They're both trying to push back the safe harbor deadline. Regardless, they're trying to push back the safe harbor deadline, but then they're also trying to push back the electors' vote because the day of the electors' vote is the day in which they must immediately enter into the 12th Amendment. The day that they vote, the day the electors meet, if they're unable to make if the certificates of the President and Senate This is not anticipating on the 12th Amendment being executed, but because this isn't the right form right here. This form is just telling you the timeline, but according to the 12th Amendment document, it states that immediately after the electors meet, after they cast their vote, the 12th Amendment states, as noted previously, Congress has conducted contingent elections twice since the 12th Amendment. Let's see if we can get a little good definition. The amendment made important changes in electoral college procedures. First, the electors continued to cast 2 votes, but they would henceforth cast separate ballots for president and vice president, 1 vote for each office. This happens immediately. The 12th Amendment is enacted immediately upon the knowledge that the vote has been tied. There's wording to the same. If you read it, there's wording to the same that says immediately after the electoral votes are okay. In one sense, this 12th Amendment has been a substantial success. Its separation of presidential and vice presidential ballots has guaranteed that there will never be an exact repeat of 1800 election. That's whenever Adams and Jefferson were president together. Much of the electoral stability achieved in the ensuing 2 centuries may also be attributed to the domination of American presidential politics by the 2-party system, which was implicitly sanctioned in this amendment. Notwithstanding the complaints of the would-be minor party or independent candidacies, the 2-party system, in conjunction with the winner-take-all system of awarding electoral votes, generally delivers an electoral college majority to 1 ticket. One potential drawback is that it has tended to deter presidential bids by independent candidates or new parties. For better or worse, the contingent elections have been conducted only twice since the ratification of the 12th Amendment. For president in 1825 following the election of 1824, and for vice president in 1837 following the election of 1836. I was trying to find good wording for the 12th. Here we are. The 12th Amendment to the Constitution provides backup or standby procedures by which the House of Representatives will elect the President and the Senate, the Vice President, in the event no candidate wins a majority of the electoral votes. Although the procedure known as contingent election has been implemented only once for each of the offices since the amendment's ratification, the failure to win the electoral college majority is theoretically possible in any presidential election. Some contingencies that might lead to the electoral college deadlock include an election closely contested by 2 major candidates leading to a tie, one with multiple candidates gain electors, but nobody gets the majority, and an election where a number of electors is sufficient to deny a majority to any candidate vote against the candidate. This is for an election where a number of electors sufficient to deny a majority to any candidate vote against the candidates to whom they are pledged. Those are faithless electors. So those are the 3 times that you can implement the 12th Amendment. The 12th Amendment is implemented on, it will be the next dates to keep our eyes out for. November 4th was Election Day to December 14th. So that's through Thanksgiving. That's called the certification process. And they're trying to push that certification process. Marco Rubio is trying to push that certification process to January. He's also trying to push the Electoral College vote back to January. The reason is because the moment they have an Electoral College vote and they have to go into the 12th Amendment, the moment they have the Electoral College hiccup, that moment is they immediately go into chambers and cast ballots. That's the wording of the 12th Amendment. It's an immediate response. And so I think they're trying to really either try to push the litigation in the states currently, or their legal work in the states are trying to really push for some fairness in the courts. And I guess if they were to certify the votes, what would happen if they were unable to certify, or if they did certify, or if there's faithless electors? I really feel as if they're trying to just push back the safe harbor deadline because they're trying to figure out what they're going to do. The longer that they can push this back, the more that they can mess with our heads. I implore anybody to check out these documents, though. They really give you a sense of the dates to look out for and the hot button words to really keep an eye out for. And always keep in mind that if somebody tells you that we do not use the popular vote to elect our president, we do in a way. You use the popular vote from the state to identify who the electors will vote for. It seems fair to me. It seems very fair. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed it. Take care.